Hello, everyone, and welcome for the second panel of the Disruption Network Club events Hacking Alienation. I am Tatiana Bazzichelli, the director of the Disruption Network Club. I'm very glad to introduce our next panel with the title Decolonising AI, with allapopp, Milagros, Miceli, Marwa, Fatafta, and moderated by Walid, El-Houri. So I'm very happy to introduce Walid now, and then leave the word to him to go on with the rest of the panel. Walid is a researcher, editor, and media specialist with a PhD in media studies from the University of Amsterdam. He is the co-founder and co-editor of Untold Mag and senior media and communication specialist at the Center for Lebanese Studies. He recently joined Global Voices as the media editor. And he works explore social and political movements, as well as the geographies of war and violence. He has taught at the Bard College Berlin and the American University of Beirut, and is a former postdoctoral fellow at the Forum Transnationale Studien and the Institute for Cultural Inquiry in Berlin. So now I leave it to you, Walid, and then welcome all the speakers here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm very happy to be chairing this panel. I'm very excited about it. Today, more than ever, I think artificial intelligence and technologies are increasingly embedded into every aspect of our lives. This is something we've been witnessing more and more in the past year, whether through machine learning, data generation, surveillance systems, or in conflict and war. Decolonizing AI is a process that requires us to critically examine the biases, power structures, and cultural paradigms that shape how these technologies are developed and deployed. So AI, like any other technology, is never neutral. It reflects the historical, social, and political context of those who create it, and technologies can serve to reinforce existing inequalities, but they can also be imagined or reimagined to challenge and dismantle systems of power. So as AI technologies rapidly evolve, we must ask who is building them, whose values and experiences are shaping them, and who is being impacted and at what cost. In an AI manifesto that one of the guest speakers, allapopp, was engaged in producing, mentions how the terms artificial and intelligence are loaded with cultural biases that are often rooted in Western, white, and male perspectives. These biases extend into how AI functions and the real-world impact it has, especially on marginalized communities. From civilian data workers whose labor is exploited to create data sets, to warfare and surveillance in occupied territories like Palestine, these technologies often harm those who are already marginalized. In our conversation today, we look at how these AI technologies perpetuate colonial legacies of exploitation and repression, but also the ways in which AI can be reimagined. And each of the amazing panelists today will add a distinct situated experience to this conversation. I will start by introducing them in the order in which they will speak. First, we will have allapopp, who brings a unique perspective from the post-Soviet decolonial context, exploring how those born on the margins of colonial and post-colonial histories can reshape AI's future through cultural, geopolitical, and artistic narratives. Allapopp is a Berlin-based interdisciplinary director, performance, and media artist, originally from Tatarstan in Russia. Allapopp's work fuses post-Soviet, mixed Tatar, queer, and migrant experiences with tech-inclusive performance and digital art, with a critical activist agenda. Allapopp's work is directed towards fostering new worlds and visions, looking for sources of inspiration and hope. Allapopp is the co-founder of the Tatar Kizlar and BBB music projects, and is part, I hope I said that one correctly, and is part of the Digital Feminism Collective and the Dreaming Beyond AI platform. Then we will have Milagros Miceli, who takes us into the often overlooked world of data work and AI ethics, when invisible labor shapes the very foundations of AI systems and the complex relationships between migration, exploitation, and power in shaping data and AI. Milagros is a sociologist and computer scientist specializing in the production of ground truth data for machine learning. Her research focuses on labor conditions and power dynamics in data work. She leads the Data Algorithm Systems and Ethics Research Group at the Weizenbaum Institute and is a researcher at the DAIR Institute and is the principal investigator of Data Workers Inquiry Project, a space for data workers to engage in AI research. And finally, we will have Marwa Fatafta, who examines the use of AI technologies in conflict zones, particularly in Gaza, where they have been weaponized to automate surveillance, discrimination, and violence, and shows us how these technologies are not isolated, but part of a global ecosystem that affects migrants and racialized communities far beyond Palestine. Marwa leads Access Now's policy and advocacy work on digital rights in the Middle East and North Africa. Her work spans a number of issues at the nexus of human rights and technology, including content governance and platform accountability, online censorship, and digital surveillance. She has written extensively on the digital occupation in Palestine and focuses on the role of new technologies in armed conflicts and humanitarian contexts and their impact on historically marginalized and oppressed communities. Each presentation will be 20 minutes. And we will then have a short conversation before opening the floor to your questions. And I will actually finally like to remind and do some self-promotion about our project, Untold Magazine, which is a bilingual independent platform. We have two special issues, one on critical AI and one on the ongoing genocide in Palestine. All the proceeds from these sales will go into commissioning more content on these topics from people there. And I thank you again. I will invite Tatiana finally to say something about or later. Okay, then I will invite allapopp to start.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. For the next 20 minutes, I'll try to unfold a vision, which comes with a simple question. Who tells the stories of our futures? Specifically focusing on the role of AI technologies in reproduction of colonial systems of power into temporality that we know as future. Specifically, I'm interested in the question of if and how the colonial approach towards artificial intelligence could be helpful in overcoming homogeneous future and tech narratives, and focus on what I call trans-Soviet migrant perspectives. I would like to share about an experiment that I've started earlier this year, which consists of facilitating a conversation about technology in general and the future with AI in particular, and with artists, researchers, and activists who are like me, were born and raised on the margins of post-Soviet territories and are now migrants here in Berlin. So I just mentioned plenty of terms, which is like decolonial AI and homogeneous future narratives and trans-Soviet, and I would like to unfold these throughout my presentation, no worries. So I will start with the trans-Soviet. And also briefly share about myself. Trans-Soviet is a term that isn't established in an academic or political context yet, very much. It's more a conversation. But I would like to show you this cute map that I've made. Trying to put together what Soviet Union used to be and kind of mapping together the former Soviet Union countries, but also regions of what we call Russia today, different national republics, krais, and oblasts, which also could have become independent, as Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan and so on, and Ukraine, of course, could have become independent on the verge of Soviet Union collapse, but this did not happen for many reasons. political reasons, of course, and I will not go deeply into this, but I really like just seeing this map, because I made this one because it doesn't, I couldn't find one that would depict these territories together with their names on it. So, of course, this is my personal opinion. I'm not a scholar in this regard, and this map is just a visualization of what I want to see. So please don't use it as any reference. So back to Trans-Soviet. What I mean with Trans-Soviet is not only a geographical reference. To me, it is something that features perspectives that could possibly transcend territory. The post-Sovietness and the Russian imperialism perspectives, which were born within the post-Soviet condition, but became perspectives of translocal solidarity. Like in the works of the feminist Translocalities project, which is based here in Berlin, and another Berlin-based project called Decolonial Language Project, which they have an open-air museum on decoloniality here in Berlin. Great two projects. There are much more of them, but I cannot name all of them right now. So trans-Sovietness to me is about solidarity and opposition to Russian imperialism and Soviet colonialism. It is about socio-political and cultural dynamics, which I find especially relevant as someone who lives in migration in Germany since over 10 years, with neither proper wish nor real possibility to return to a homeland. So who am I? I am an interdisciplinary digital media and performance artist. Thank you, Walid, for the successive presentation before that. I will not say much about it, but I will show you a picture of me in the past. This is me, this is my past. So this is, I am a Volga Tatar on one half, and my Tatars are Turkic people, and that's me like on the far left. On my left. And my mom comes from an old believer village in Komi Republic in the north of the country, more or less around the polar circle. So as an artist, that person there, digitalizes this body since 2014. And by making body scans and voice copies, and I let my body interact with the digital realm, but also I let my physical body perform in the physical realm, observing how digital technologies change the physical realm, and so on. So my body can look like this. This is my physical body, and there's my conjoined twin clone, or it can look like this. This is what I look like when I'm processed by various generative AI models. Or my body can also look like this. And I would like to stop on this image here when I'm talking about my art. Because I want to take it as a bridge to something I call homogeneous future and tech narratives. Because one day I looked at my work and I was like, where is this person in that other body that we just seen before, that perfected body that looks like an iPhone? And then I asked another question. Why have I never encountered Tatar or Komi sci-fi, actually? Why in the narrative about the future, there is no narrative that comes from my culture? And then I really like at this point to bring this quote by Rua Benjamin, who says, first, by recognizing that there are two popular stories we currently tell about technology, the tech is either going to save us or slay us. And that Silicon Valley loves the utopian vision. I had to shorten a lot because they evoke it to sell gadgets. So in Silicon Valley sells a utopian vision, and Hollywood sells a dystopian vision because it helps to sell tickets. So it's either dystopian science fiction about evil cyborgs, they're robots and AI who are going to destroy the human race, or we are part of this commercial techno-utopia. And AI ethicist Sarah Wachter says that 96% of the world does not live in the United States, but the majority of our digital tools, platforms are based on US customs, political culture, and laws. So here again, I come back to this question. Who gets to tell the stories of our futures? And then I wondered, what kind of futures could I imagine rooted in my lived experience? Because my lived experience stretches between continents, countries, and cultures, various knowledge systems and societal structures, it is conditioned by a deeply internalized colonial oppressor with whom I live, with whom I now have to have daily conversations when attempting doing anything that is connected to my past and where I come from or today. Because I grew up under Russification, then moved to the West to be conditioned by Western normativity and had to adopt again. But how and who am I here? How can I imagine the futures at this point? As an artist, a cultural, geopolitical, ethnic half-blood shaped by experience of migration from the margins of post-Soviet spaces and the post-Soviet inferiority complex. With no real political power, representation, or institutional support, occupied with migrant status and visa problems, often silenced by this condition because I don't want to have problems with police because you don't want to have problems with Auslanamt. So I've encountered Decolonial AI manifesto in 2022, and it aligned very well for me with the evolving decolonial dialogue happening among my trans-Soviet peers, trans-locally, but also within the diaspora here in Berlin, which grew very fast since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The Decolonial AI manifesto is a collective document. It's an incredibly inspirational work. It was co-authored by Stanford scholar Sabella Mlambi, together with many others co-authors and scholars and activists. And this manifesto emphasizes the need to rethink AI in a way that empowers historically marginalized groups by addressing the colonial legacies embedded in AI systems. So their work highlights the importance of shifting power from Western tech monopolies to communities affected by AI technologies, particularly in the global South. And when I was reading this, I was like, yes, this work is looking at the global South, which is so important, of course. But then I realized that in the realm where I come from, there is no conversation on this. So this manifesto is an invitation. And it covers, it's a question, it's an opening I'm reading from the introduction, about future AI technologies that is decolonial. And it calls for further versions of Decolonial AI manifesto to come to light. So it particularly focuses on problems like what are the language challenges, like that our AI systems are coded with in English, for example, that artificial and intelligence are terms that carry cultural biases, and actually AI should be seen as a multifaceted entity. So it is helping in the process of the ongoing colonial erasure, that it supports Western normativity and promotes, it multiplies it, because AI is nothing more than a multiplication of what we think and what of our intentions. These are just very powerful systems. So it highlights the role of technology in human life, and that humanity is humans are relational beings, and that technology should also be relational, based on interconnectedness, and that it challenges AI algorithmic truths. It acknowledges, or it points out that AI is indeed reshaping reality with different systems of knowledge that are being carried further with us using this tool, and then it calls to question which systems of knowledge are there for this tool. It also calls for marginalized communities, although I really do not like this word, for people who are not represented by the systems to find their own way of interpretation what AI, decolonial AI could be. So, yeah, and this is where I took on my turn and envisioned this experiment, which I'm going to be speaking very briefly. So I envisioned this experiment to talk about technological envisioning with people who share my lived experience, indigenous and migrant, and conducted decolonial envisioning research sessions. And in March this year, I've gathered together a small group of now Berlin-based artists, writers, technologists, dancers, and magic practitioners, dissidents and cultural carriers of indigenous nations and small-numbered ethnicities with experience of life in and migration from post-Soviet spaces, specifically the regions of North and Central Asia and North Caucasus. I'm coming, I know it sounds probably very complicated, but I'm coming from a place that is very complicated because it's a niche and a niche in a niche in a niche. It's a box in a box in a box, and you need to unfold all these boxes in 20 minutes. These research sessions were conceptualized in the conversations with and by the facilitators, language activists, and Tatar poetess, and my colleague in the Tatar Kızlar project, Dinara Rasulova, and technologists, artists, and knowledge facilitators active in the field of decolonial AI discourse in Europe, particularly Noam Young-Rakson and Eyob Bisek, who are also part of the digital Dreaming Beyond AI platform. And they have designed sessions specifically in conversation with me. We were trying to kind of bring this trans-local solidarity and find out how could we talk about AI, bringing in our perspectives. So the goal of the sessions was to, on one hand, envision technologies rooted in our own culture, and which then would altogether constitute audio, text, and visual data sets, which then will be used by multimodal generative AI, becoming its own system of knowledge for envisioning tech-inclusive futures. But how do you do it actually? How do you envision a different AI system? How do you decolonize AI system? I will share a bit of my own principles in organizing the sessions, because organizing the sessions itself is the process of decolonizing AI to me. So to me, it was very important to pay attention to how we feel in a space and with each other when we enter the space, each person, not only participants, but also facilitators, everyone. It was about acknowledging and respecting our various needs in these conversations, intentions, and being aware of intentions one brings into the conversation. It was a lot about reflecting the internalized colonial oppressor. It was about allowing honesty and fragility, even if it hurts, and acknowledging the fact that this process is not a hobby, it's work, and it should be paid for. And so this session took place in 3 days, and I will just briefly run over what we've done. So in the first session with Dinara Rasulova, we shared, which Dinara was hosting, and this is the person with whom I'm going to host, we're going to do the workshop together. We've shared about our cultural background, where we come from, and our experience of colonialism and imperialism, our losses, our languages. It was very different for everyone, because the places we come from are super diverse. I'm showing you now my part of it, my part of the presentation, my narrative. So then at the end of the session, Dinara asked, so what from your culture would you like to take to the future? And we did a tarot reading. And with this tarot reading stories, everyone wrote their own part of a story. I don't want to now go into detail on their stories. I'm just focusing on mine. Then together with Noam created this very interesting LARP. They had this funny LARP idea where we then will embody our characters, our AI, our ideas of technologies, and then we will bring these elements into a AI system that will have a relation to one another. So when one here is the character card, this is the relation card between these elements. It was crazy. It's really nothing productive. But it opens up your mind in a different way, right? Because this is what our AI system looks like now. This is our AI world. Beautiful. So part of it, I will just show you now. What my technological idea was is a pie. This is a pie I baked, and I made it. My mom showed me how to do it, and I was like, great. So why won't, food is technology, right? So why won't our communication technology be food? Then I started deconstructing it to what it could be, and then these words came from third session that we've been doing together with Io, and Io was presenting us with her vision on archives and archiving, methods of archiving and taking care of archives, and also affirmative data labeling. There are no concrete answers, as I said. Unfortunately, I wish I had those, but no. And we haven't solved anything. But in this session, we as a group of trans-Soviet indigenous and migrant activists, we created a sense of base for a possibility for such envisioning, which works for our own context only. So we started decolonizing AI in our minds by exchanging about it, by learning what AI is in a conversation with each other, what role does it play in our lives, how does it influence us, how it excludes us, how it amplifies us, also in some very exotic ways sometimes. So it created a possibility for political participation. Because actually, as I said at the beginning, as a migrant, as someone who had to first go through, we were talking about migrant before, I was first an internal migrant within Russia, because I moved to St. Petersburg sometime in my life from Tatarstan, which is really far away. And then I migrated from, after the internal migration in Russia, I migrated to Germany and so on. So in a way, I've learned to be in a very disempowered position, and art actually became my place of empowerment, where I could envision and imagining my own words. That's why I think that technological envisioning is one of the little means that I see right now, means of political participation, because also without having a status, I cannot vote, etc. So. Yeah, I would like to finish now my presentation with this message. I think that by telling future stories and by including visions of future technologies infused with decolonial perspective, one enables their presence in the future, whatever it is, future, we also don't know, thus enabling a political participation and co-creation of the world. And I encourage to look to each person in this room, whatever your experience is, to look at your own hidden and forgotten histories and look at needs and exit the matrix of technological optimization in a way that works for you and share it with the world. Believe that technology doesn't have to be what it is today, and maybe one day we will come to a future where technology is there to serve everyone and not just some. And to the question, like when in a decolonial AI panel, people really like the question, so can AI be decolonized? I will not answer this question, but I will ask another one, which is, what will be left of AI systems if we take away this system's colonial core?
Thank you, Alla. Thank you, Alla. This was, I think, a lot of these questions we will get back to and try to to see if there is an answer. I will invite Milagros.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I think we need my slide. Yes, there you come. Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor for me to share this space with amazing speakers. I will be talking today about harms that are done through AI and with AI to migrants, and I'm using that term in lack of a better one, but also because I feel very comfortable reclaiming that term as a migrant. And I will be talking specifically about the harms that are done to migrants in the context of producing AI and producing data, and I will be talking about data work then. And I will do that based on this research project, the Data Workers Inquiry, which is a community-based research project, meaning that we engage data workers for a certain amount of time to do research of their own, research that matters to them, research in their workplaces, And as you will see, I will show you some of the findings from that project. You will see that the findings are not done or are not presented in what you would typically call or think of in terms of, you know, your typical research paper, but mostly the workers have produced things that make sense for a broader audience, for their colleagues, also as a means for organizing. There's audiovisual material and so on. I invite you all to go take a look at the website. Also, I will have QR codes for each one of the snippets that I will show. I will have QR codes on the slides. If you want to scan and see them for yourselves, I think the workers will be very grateful. So, but first of all, let's define data work, because that will be the word of my presentation. When we talk about data work, we are talking, maybe you have heard terms like micro work or click work, ghost work, and so on. We are talking about the labor that goes into producing data for AI systems. That's the fuel of AI, and also the labor that goes into making sure that AI systems work as they were intended to work. And one thing to know about data workers or data work is that it's mostly outsourced, even though it's commissioned and requested by, in many cases, AI big tech companies like OpenAI, Google, Meta, and so on. The workers are not in those places, are not within the companies. They are outsourced. And when I say outsourced, I also mean they are outsourced in other countries that are not Silicon Valley, for example. So in this map, I don't know how well you can see it, but you will see probably that there are blue and red dots. The blue dots are the requesters, and basically you can see their location. There's a high concentration on in North America and Central Europe, and the blue dots, the red dots are the data workers. And to find the data workers, then probably you are looking more south and more east, so to the global majority. So in the project, the data workers inquiry, and again, go visit the website if you want to, we have engaged 15 of these data workers located in 4 continents. Some of them chose to remain anonymous because of obvious reasons, because of fear of retaliation, which is very, very real in this industry, and also because there is a veil of secrecy that characterizes this industry, right? The workers, all of them have signed NDAs with their companies that keep them from disclosing what type of work they do, for whom they do this work, and the nature of the content they actually work with. Yes, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's go into to talk about what this work actually looks like. And I will do so, as I said before, by showing you some of the work that the data workers that work with us have produced. Here I have to, first of all, I want to issue a trigger warning. There will be some depictions of violence, very broadly meant, but also sexual abuse and child sexual abuse, so trigger warning for that. And also I have to say, it is a somewhat an awkward position to be here telling you these stories that actually don't belong to me. One of the principles that we had for this project was that the workers get to tell their stories in their own terms and in the way that they want to. So my slides will be very much copy-paste parts of the reports that they have produced, and I will also have snippets of videos and a podcast that they have produced, so I don't need to tell you, you can hear for yourselves. Okay, so the first thing that you need to know about data work are that the wages are terrible. These workers, they don't get enough, in many cases they don't get enough to make a living out of this work, and if they do, it's just merely to survive. As you see here, you can see here, this is the video produced by Oscarina in Venezuela. She's a migrant now in Colombia. She lives in Colombia now. She needs between 35 minutes and 1 hour to produce $1 on the platforms, on data work platforms. Yasser from Syria tells us he works all day long to get $10. That's 8 hours for $10, 10 US dollars. And that doesn't even, because these workers, they are freelancers in the sense you know, that many of you might know it. So all their expenses, electricity bills, internet bills, they are all paid by them. If the computer breaks down, they need to pay for repairing that. So it's always $10 minus expenses, right? And then finally, also, there are cases in which the workers are hired by specialized companies, data work companies, and in those cases, they receive more or less a fixed salary that is also very, very low, and that also it's tied to their performance, so there is also some insecurity going on. And in those cases, you can see here an example from Kenya in which the workers receive $1.50 per hour. That's what they receive as their salary. And as I was saying before, I was inferring before, there is a lot of uncertainty tied to this work. In the case of the workers who work at the platforms, the uncertainty takes the shape of not knowing if there will be enough tasks for them to perform, if they will make enough money by the end of the month to actually be able to you know, pay for their expenses, to pay rent, to eat, basically. And in other cases, the uncertainty comes in the shape of, like here, this is a comic that was produced by Willington Shitawa, one of our co-researchers from Kenya, in which he is employed in one of those companies, but the uncertainty takes the shape of short contracts, and I've seen contracts that are very normal, as short as 1 month. So, you know, you get a job, but you don't know how long that job will last. And then, of course, that uncertainty turns into plain wage theft. Here, Yasser from Syria tells us actually what that looks like.
The compensation is always subject to change at the end of the project. The company holds the power to reject a batch of work, even after we've poured our time and effort into completing it. This could end up costing us money instead of helping us earn it.
So what he says about costing us money is what I was saying before, right? He still needs to pay for internet in his case because of the unstable internet connection in his area. In many cases, he needs to go to an internet cafe or a co-working space or whatever to actually be able to work. So that also, you know, creates an expense for him that in many cases means he's not earning anything. And here it's very important to note, again, the client holds power to keep the data but not pay for that. By just saying, I don't like the way this data has been produced, this doesn't I don't know, reaches our quality standards or the quality standards that we had for this project. And the client gets to keep that data. This is not blocked away from them. It is still, they keep it in their server, but they don't pay. This is very common, by the way. So, wage theft sometimes takes the shape of being paid in gift cards, and this is a very ridiculous example. This is by a report produced by Alexis Chavez, one of our co-researchers in Venezuela, who interviewed other people working for Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is the largest and oldest data work platform. And yes, it is Amazon. So these workers, mostly located in the global majority, in the so-called global south, are paid with gift cards. So they don't get money for their work, they get gift cards. So they work for Amazon, Mechanical Turk, and they receive Amazon.com gift cards to buy in their marketplace. And of course, wage theft here happens also because they have to buy goods that then they sell in their local markets. They need to pay import fees, and they need to pay shipping costs for those goods. So in the end, they lose money. They end up losing money for that. And this is, again, very widespread. Only, I think, in the US, workers who work for this platform are given the choice to get money or gift cards. In the majority world, they receive only gift cards. So, as you can imagine, all these issues, they have a very, very detrimental impact on workers' mental health. You know, not being able to plan for the future, all the uncertainty. It causes a lot of stress, as Oscarina puts it in her video. And then the mental health issue takes a turn for the worse when it comes to working with disturbing content, which is very, very usual in this industry. So this is Moffat Okinyi, one of our community researchers from Kenya, who worked for a company called Sama, producing data for OpenAI for ChatGPT. So his work was actually reviewing very disturbing materials and, separating what was supposed to be picked up by ChatGPT as training material and what wasn't. So let's listen to him directly.
So the effect were across the board. Everyone who worked on the project experienced this kind of mental challenges, especially sexual content can really affect someone's emotions and how you think and how you see people. Bearing the fact that we were reading text about rape, violently raping people and some people were being killed, it hit me so much as a person, as an individual, because after working on this text and my behavior started changing, and by that time I was married to a young beautiful lady. And then when my behavior started changing and screaming at night, waking up, not sleeping, she started questioning my behavior. But with our Kenyan culture, you can't just explain to someone that you are working on sexual content. They might think that you are doing something illegal. So I kept this to myself, and my wife could not cope up with my change in behavior, and she decided to go.
So as you can see, this affects not only the workers, and we are talking of a large workforce of around 500 million workers around the world. These are numbers from the World Bank, which is a conservative institution, basically. Affects a lot of workers, but also their communities, their families, and so on. And I think cases like this show what happens when this work is outsourced, because then nobody's responsible. The OpenAI is not responsible. Sama, the company that hired Moffat, says we are not responsible. This is content that is given to us by OpenAI, and so on. So who is responsible? These workers don't receive any type of psychological support. So this is another example of this. This is Fasika's report that is really, really worth reading it. She describes how this then affects in a different way, like even worse way, migrant workers. Fasika comes from Tigray in Africa. She went to Kenya, escaping the genocide happening in Tigray a few years back, and ended up, she and many of her colleagues ended up moderating content that was coming from the genocide that she had just escaped. So you can imagine what a terrible situation that was for her. And again, nobody's responsible, nobody feels responsible for her psychological scars. So finally, this brings me to the question, or a question that I get a lot is, okay, but why would people do that? If the conditions are so shitty, why wouldn't they just do something else? Well, here I want to be very clear. There is a situation of dependency, but the situation of dependency is specifically and intentionally created by these companies and by the platforms. The platforms target specifically vulnerable populations who don't have a lot of options. They go to places like Kenya, like Africa, like Latin America, places with where the economy is not great, with high unemployment rates. And they take advantage of that. And they also go within those places, they target specifically vulnerable populations. I've seen companies targeting refugees. I've seen companies like in Buenos Aires go into the slums to recruit workers. This is something that Willington in his comic also discusses. So in those places where there is no chance to have a lot of dreams and a lot of options, of course you will take the job, and of course you will do as you are instructed to keep that job, no matter how terrible the conditions are. Here there's the report written by Rukaya Al-Hamada. She comes from Syria, is a refugee in Lebanon, and explains specifically how this affects refugee populations who don't, because they are refugees and because of the constraints imposed to them with the status, how that affects them and how that, and I quote, how they remain at the mercy of their employers. And I want to be also very clear, this is nothing that happens in third world countries very far away from us. This also happens in Germany, and here migrants and refugees are very much targets of this type of predatory behavior from the companies. This is a podcast produced by workers here in Germany, in Essen, and I would like you to hear from them how workers who are dependent on the visa to keep their, on the work to keep their visa are victims of this.
Dazu gibt es noch Kollegen, die ihre Aufenthaltsgenehmigung durch diese Arbeit bekommen. Habt ihr auch mitbekommen, dass die Firma das ausnutzt und viele Leute diesbezüglich erpresst bzw. in ein schlechtes oder sie dazu zwingt, Sachen zu machen, die sie so nicht machen wollen würden, ohne diese Bedingungen?
So beyond this being in German, sorry for that, I should have given you a warning, but I hope you could read the subtitles. The voices are distorted, of course, because of fears of retaliation. So, okay, finally this one, of course, oppression also has its intersection, and gender is one of those intersections. So this is the zine produced by Ranta, who comes from South Africa, working as a content moderator in Kenya. And she tells the story, this is a beautiful zine, beautiful illustrations, go read it. She tells the story of 9 women, migrant women working as content moderators in Kenya, and here is an excerpt of how she tells how 2 of those women were raped by a colleague, and how the company, knowing this, still forced those women, did nothing to protect them, and forced them to work alongside their perpetrator for months. These women not having a lot of chances to leave because, yeah, they depending on the job to remain in Kenya. So, very briefly, why should we care? Why should we care about this? And here, of course, it's about solidarity, and I really hope we all feel that solidarity for fellow workers who are in a more disadvantaged position than we are, and I think that's key, right? But beyond solidarity, why is this important? This is important because the vulnerable situations in which these workers are put into allows these companies like OpenAI, like Meta and different tech giant companies to create truth, to create worlds that then they sell us as the unique way in which the world is. So these workers, the vulnerability of these workers and the dependency allow these companies to impose truth on them, and through their labor, to impose those truth values into the data and the systems. And let me be clear, these are systems that in many cases have decisive, they decide our chances, or they are decided for our chances to access vital resources. And they will continue to be so in the future. And here you can see how the instructions that are given to the workers are super narrow. They, they tell us a lot about what these companies think that a human is, and how that human is to be classified in terms of race, in terms of gender. And that has consequences on the systems. These are AI-generated images, and here you can see the prompts and what the generator outputs. And of course, someone playing soccer is a black man, and someone cleaning is a femme-presenting person. And someone looking for social services is, of course, a person of color. And whereas a productive person is a white dude in a suit. And this also has to do with social media, and because some of these workers also decide what is hate speech and what is not, and what type of content is for us to be seen online and what is not. And I highly recommend you to go look at Marwa's report, which I love the title because she says it's not a glitch, and it is not. And I want to be very clear about this: it is not a glitch. Meta systematically censors Palestinian voices, and it does so by imposing these worldviews on the workers who then decide and classify whether something is hate speech or terrorism and something is not. And in the same way, we can see this report by Amnesty in which they report how abusive or hate speech towards LGBTQ plus communities have experienced a surge after Elon Musk has taken power on Twitter. So yeah, it's not a glitch. This is very much intentional, and there is a relationship between how workers are treated, their dependency to this type of work, and the meanings that are imposed on all of us through AI. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Milagros. I think you made the perfect transition to Marwa.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to thank Tatiana and the Disruption Lab team for organizing this event at this critical time, and also for you, the audience, for sacrificing such a beautiful day outside, which is very rare in Berlin to be here. And I do want to start with a confession that I've always struggled with the term decolonizing AI, or anything decolonizing plus something. I disliked it, but then when I look at the problem from the perspective of colonization and how these technologies are, departing from the framework of, let's look at the harms of AI as side effects that are a problem of garbage data sets, racist data sets, and that if we, for example, train workers better, have large models, include more languages, have more oversight, more accountability, then we fix the problem. But what if these very tools were created for the very purpose of colonization, for the very purpose of mass slaughter, mass destruction, as we see today in occupied Palestine, and particularly in Gaza? And then that makes very much sense to me, and your presentation really is a great segue to that effect, that these systems are intended to make harm, to inflict harm on marginalized communities, and it's not just a bystand effect that we can somehow fix. And speaking from the current reality in Gaza, obviously, I'm sure, how many of you heard of lavender the past few months? I expected a larger crowd, but that's why I'm here today. So let me start by saying that Israel, over the decades, has managed to create a mass surveillance system. I, as a Palestinian, every single Palestinian, is somehow in our DNA, we know that we're being watched, that Israel as an occupying power knows everything about us, including the very intimate details about our sexual orientation, about our affairs, about our children, about our health conditions, about financial status. It is important for the policing and control of an occupation, and sometimes use that information in order to coerce people to collaborate or to be spies. For example, if they know that there is a gay person in an extremely conservative village, then they're blackmailed to collaborate with the Israeli authorities. Otherwise, they can be exposed. And of course, here, AI and other technologies have become a new vehicle to automate not only the mass surveillance of Palestinians, but also to automate the system of apartheid, of oppression. Because at the end of the day, what is settler colonialism? What is occupation? You box people, you give them certain IDs, and then you decide, where do these populations go? Where are they located? And how, for example, I as an individual, I'm allowed to only move in a certain territory that is designated by my oppressor. And within that system, and in the current situation in Gaza right now, where I also have to emphasize that this population has been living on a 2G network till today, where already the whole world has moved to 5G, because it's easy to intercept. It's not encrypted way of communications. It makes surveillance a very easy process to collect the data of 2.3 million people. And so that, when you create such a massive surveillance system, there's a challenge, and that is you have huge amounts of data, and AI comes to the rescue here because it allows the Israeli occupation forces to process and analyze the data as fast as possible and to generate, for example, targets, kill lists, buildings that they need to bomb, and under some elite unit called the Unit 8-100 in the Israeli army, they created a number of AI systems that are, such as the Gospel, Alchemist, Lavender, which made headlines the past few months. But those systems, I want to emphasize that they're not new. In fact, they were used, or at least, for example, the Gospel we know from IDF sources that they have been used in the Gaza war in 2021, and the IDF actually wrote a blog post boasting about the first artificial intelligence war that they had back then and how it transformed warfare to them. So let's take a close look at Lavender. Because otherwise, we will spend the whole day here talking about all these different layers of violence and associated with different programs and AI systems and technologies that Israel uses in the occupied territories. So the Lavender system basically analyzes information collected pretty much on everyone in Gaza, that is 2.3 million people. And then it assesses and analyzes on a scale from 0 to 100, if that person is a Hamas member or not. And so it ranks individuals. And with that ranking, the system automatically generates so-called kill lists. So these are targets that the IDF can bomb. And in accompany to that system, there is another disgustingly named system called Where's Daddy, where it tracks in real time those targets. And the moment they enter their family home, they're bombed. And as you can already imagine, there are extremely serious and terrifying aspects to this, as in fact, you see in real life the horrors that are unleashed by these systems, by AI, that it's not just some Hollywood film that you have to pay for to see this utopia, but an actual reality that people are living right now. And looking at that system, I tried to break down what are the different problems, if you may, with these systems. And the first one is the lack of oversight and accountability, where the outputs of that system has been, or let me put it the other way. The soldiers have been told that the outputs of that system should be treated like a human decision. And in times of war, ideally, any army that respects international law should do a proper legal assessment and real understanding of the target in order to avoid killing civilians or damaging civilian infrastructures that are protected by international law. But here, whatever Lavender tells you as a soldier, you just press the button. And one of the soldiers that confessed, and of course we know about AI, and I should mention, thanks to the work of investigative journalists that unearthed this dystopian tech to us. And one of the soldiers said that the only check that sometimes we have to see is, if the target is male or not, because all the kill lists are made of male. And that's also another, extremely racist and sexist decolonial understanding of who is a combatant, that men automatically are combatants, are terrorists, that their killing is justified. And of course, innocent civilians are just women and children. That's another issue that I'll park it aside. And so, according to the soldiers, this statistical way of killing people is an easy one because, you just follow whatever the system tells you, you press the button, and just to quote one of the soldiers, he say, that there's something about the statistical approach that sets you to a certain norm and standard. And the machine, does it coldly, and that made it easier. Another huge problem tied to this is disproportionality. So the Israeli army systematically targets individuals while they're in their homes. You might ask why? Because it's easier. Because every person in Gaza has a family and has a home. So if you want to look for that person, you want to see when they enter their home and bomb them there, regardless if, and again, we're talking about buildings that have many families living in them in times of war. Families shelter together, so the collateral damage is actually, what they call the collateral damage, is actually much higher. And what we've seen is that people have, entire neighborhoods have been completely wiped out, entire families have been completely removed from the civil registry. And next to that is not only, just bombing entire buildings because some suspected person lives there, but also they decided that, look, we're not going to spend expensive weapons on these individuals. We're going to just use dump bombs, or at least that's what they refer to. Cheaper bombs that are not precise, that create so much damage that are, for example, able to completely remove and destroy entire buildings, and you see these just huge holes on Earth where you can never imagine that there was actually a 5-story building where people lived in and sheltered. And then there's also tied to that, and sometimes these systems err. And for example, with the "Where is Daddy?", at least one of the soldiers said that when we even track the real person, the person or the target in real life, there's sometimes a lag between the system, what the system shows us, and the real movement of that person. And so they think that they went home and they bombed the building, but in fact they just killed innocent people without killing the so-called target. Which leads me to my third point here, and that is, who is a target? And here, who is identified as a Hamas operative? And many of the people who have been included in that system include people who are working in the police, and let's not forget that Hamas is the de facto government in Gaza, and so people who work in the ministries, who work in the municipality, who are working in civil defense, policemen, these are people who are not combatants. Those are people who just work like everybody else and earn a salary and feed their children. And so the loose term of who is a Hamas member and to train that system is problematic to begin with. And then some of the data that is used to train that system, such as, for example, communication patterns. So imagine you are a Hamas combatant. Obviously, you need to conceal your identity. You probably change your phones multiple times. And that can be seen in the system as a flag that this person, is very likely to be a Hamas member. But then let's also think about the fact that people are living in war. There's no electricity, no fuel in Gaza for almost a year now. And so people lose their phones. They probably use the phones of their loved ones that have been killed. The pattern of communication itself is also spotty. And so you can imagine a scenario where the system ranks someone as a Hamas member just because they've changed their phones multiple times, or because they happen to have the identical name of someone who is a Hamas member. And here, I want to, when it comes to lavender, I want to mention one final point, and that is the issue of accuracy. I've outlined a number of issues, but then when the system, decides on its own, like who's Hamas and who is not, the soldiers found that there is an error rate of 10%. That is, the system can be wrong about the so-called targets that they generate, and 10% is a big number, is a big percentage. And that again, it is a system that is deployed outside of the realm of any accountability, any transparency, not alone any respect for law or international norms or ethics. And that's not the only way that the Israeli authorities use AI in order to control Palestinians. I mean, obviously, if you I talked about mass surveillance, and there I would like to mention the use of biometric surveillance to facial recognition systems in order to control and police Palestinian communities, for example, in the West Bank, systems such as Blue Wolf and Red Wolf. These are systems, for example, Blue Wolf is an app that Israeli soldiers use at checkpoint. They first prototyped it or tested it in my city, in Hebron, where Palestinians are identified by soldiers through this app, and it gives you a sort of a traffic light system where red means that this person is a suspect and needs to be detained, and green means that you can pass the checkpoint to go to your destination. And with the ground invasion of Gaza, of course, to Israel, that has been a perfect opportunity to expand this biometric surveillance database to include Gaza, and now we've heard reports about facial recognition systems used by the Israeli authorities through a company called, Israeli company called Quartzite, and also using Google Photos in order to identify the identity of Palestinians there. And I had the same question as in your presentation, as that why should we care? And I always, wherever I go, I always say that, what happens in Palestine really doesn't stay in Palestine, and that is evident by the proliferation of spyware and surveillance technologies that we hear about, including here in this continent in Europe, that is used against dissidents and activists and journalists. And so, this is not an isolated issue. This is not a problem that happens overseas and is happening in Gaza. But that's an issue that these very systems will be commodified, will be sold as battle-tested, marketed as battle-tested and sold here in Europe. And actually, that some of these very systems have indeed been either funded by EU research institutions or used by EU by European agencies in order to crack down on migrants. And I'd like to, with the little time I have, to share a few examples about how such entanglements occur. And I want to start with Quartzite, the Israeli company that is used for the facial recognition surveillance that Israel uses in Gaza. So Quartzite is an Israeli company. It's owned by another Israeli AI startup called Cortica. And the director and the chief scientist of that company is also the head of a research center at Technion Institute, or Technion. And he is also the director of one of the first so-called Minerva centers. These are centers that are established in Israel, in Israeli universities, in six universities, but are funded and established by the German Ministry of Science. And they have ties to Max Planck Institute, which is a society, which is a very prestigious research institute here. And according to a press release from this company, they hail the fact that the founders that developed Cortica's core facial recognition system and technology actually were done at that center. And even though, according to an investigation done by a friend of mine, a journalist who lives here in Germany and works or published this investigation in the New Arab, there is no direct link. She couldn't find a direct link of that money coming from the German ministry through Max Planck to this research. But at least here we're talking about systems and institutions that enable and provide the environment for the development and the prototyping of such systems. And the examples are many. Again, we can talk about drones and drone companies that the EU has been funding through different mechanisms, including El-Bayt systems, Rafael systems. These are major Israeli drone companies that pretty much provide all the drones that Israel uses in Gaza and in previous wars in Gaza to kill Palestinians, and which have, as I said, either been funded, their research funded by the EU, or have been used by EU institutions to patrol and control the Mediterranean area for the purpose of controlling and oppressing and attacking migrants. And that leads me to my final point, and that is, how do we, from the understanding of what these colonial AI systems are, how do we decolonize AI? And from my perspective, decolonizing AI is not about cleaning data sets so the system becomes less racist. It's about abolishment. I think these systems should not exist in the first place. Biometric surveillance should be abolished, should be banned. AI systems that automate the mass slaughter and destruction of innocent people at a scale and intensity not seen since World War II should be abolished. And again, here it's not only about the technology itself, but also who stands behind it, who creates it, who funds it, who uses it. And a key part of decolonization here is breaking down those systems and those structures that enable the funding and the prototyping of such systems. And I think that we are at a historical juncture where we're witnessing for the first time in history, the real horrors that these systems have unleashed on people. And I think it has changed warfare profoundly, that we are now at a point where we have to take action to ensure that what happened in Gaza, or what is happening in Gaza, does not happen elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwa. I think I would like to perhaps start with two questions for everyone, because I think there is a lot of interconnection between the three presentations, but also there is this underlying question of first, maybe I will start with the more projecting question, let's say, about when we talk about decolonizing, and as a concept, there is always this kind of reparative notion about it. And then also when we talk about AI, there is this also futuristic projections about what are the potential of harm that we see very often. What I want to maybe ask the three of you to reflect on a bit, or try to think about a bit, is there a possibility of having this kind of, and I will not say artificial intelligence because of this, let's say AI, because it removes the two terms, and it's an illusion like migrant to what the general thing we're trying to talk about, and we're having a problem defining, So is there a potential, can we imagine a reparative AI system, or is there a process when we remove the colonial, is there a possibility of removing the colonial from such technological systems? And if there is one, if you think, maybe you disagree, if there is such a possibility, what would be a reparative AI, if not to call it a decolonial one? I don't know if maybe we can start also in the same order with Allah.
You said reparative?
Like reparations,
yeah.
from...
I mean, I would say that the workshop that we're going to do tomorrow, I think is the one step that I can think of, getting closer to an answer. And tomorrow we decided to focus on envisioning recipes, actually, and what kind of food would, exist in the future, and how could food be AI, which is sounds pretty dumb to me right now after your presentation, and after what about from how AI technologies are being used to really kill people. So, but yeah, I think it's about stripping it from its colonial core means taking away, to me, means taking away its power and putting power in other hands. And by this session tomorrow, this is what we'll try to do. Take power of imagination and imagination to the future into other hands.
It's a hard question to answer after Marwa's presentation, because I'm wondering, as much as I want to say yes, there is the possibility to repair, I'm wondering how are we going to repair Gaza after this? And who's going to repair all the evil and the hurt and the pain and the harm? So, yeah, I don't know. I have a problem with that. I also have a problem with the term decolonial. I like the transitive character of decolonizing as in a process in which that never stops and is never fully done. So, yeah, I apologize for being so negative right now. Maybe in a more positive note, I don't know if there is a possibility to repair, but there is definitely a possibility to create new things. And for that, I feel decentralizing, which Ala was just referring to, the idea of removing power concentration away from power centers, and sharing that power, and also fostering new power, fostering power in specific communities to create technologies that serves them. Because technology doesn't, there's a premise in AI, there's a lot of AI that is produced and developed with scale in mind, as in one size of AI needs to fit us all and serve us all. That doesn't work. That has proven not to work. That only serves the ones that are always have been historically being served. So I feel that there are projects that gives us hope. There are projects that are created in smaller communities with specific communities in mind, serving specific purposes. And this is also why it was important to us to let the data workers create a research question of their own, and conduct that research to tell us what is it that is important to them, not what we researchers think is important to them. And the same applies to technology, I feel. I don't know, I'm rambling a little bit, sorry.
I think I have a similar position to you. I have a very radical position towards that question, and that is, as I said in the beginning of my presentation, I don't think you can fix a system that is already rigged. You can't fix tools that are built on exploitation, that are intended to recycle discrimination and bias and automate existing ways of discrimination and violence. But the reality is, I agree that if you can't fix it, then you need to create something new. You need to create a new model that is created by the people and for them, which is, isn't it the cliche of democracy? But at the same time, the reality is, sadly, not a very optimistic one. Look at the huge companies that are championing the AI race. From Microsoft to Amazon Web Services to Google, and I didn't talk about that, but these are the very same companies that are providing cloud computing services and AI capabilities, for example, to the Israeli army right now. And so how do you create new systems in the midst of this monopoly? And we're talking about money and power, lack of regulation at a global scale, and in that picture, or in this landscape, and that's what I do in my day-to-day job, is that at least force these companies to be transparent, for these companies to be accountable, expose the different ways of exploitation, as, for example, Mila just showed us in her presentation. Or this is what we can do right now. And I know it's not much in this capitalist system we live in, but at least it's one way forward to make these, to make them less harmful. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, everyone. I think I will, since we do not have a lot of time left, so I will open it up already to the audience, and because I see a lot of hands, I will start with Stella.
Thank you very much for powerful, different, but sort of very different presentations, but eventually you conclude the same way. I think I have two questions. One is in response to this proposal to abolish AI because of the injury it's done. That's one way. The other one is asking about reparations. I think for me then, if I were an insider, given all the capitalism and what's happening, what would justice look like? What would justice look like today for a person in Palestine? Because that too is another way of thinking about resistance, right? How do we who have, especially given that 10% error, that margin of error. And I think for you, allapopp, I'm very much interested in your conclusion around if we decolonize AI, we take away its soul, is it still AI? But I was drawn to the manifesto with a Y, not an I, and the power of language. And I want to ask about the community of people with whom you work, diverse migrants. And I think for me, again, issues around language and the coloniality of English, given you're all so different, how are you talking about this thing you're doing? And if it's in fact in English language, then we are fucked. We're still colonized. We have to communicate even in Germany in English. But yeah, those are my 2 points. Thank you.
Would you like maybe Marwa and then Ala?
Okay. Yeah, what does justice look like? It looks like an immediate arms embargo, an immediate ceasefire, sanctions, arrest warrants, holding the perpetrators accountable, and then also holding companies accountable for their role profiting off the killing of people. For me, right now, companies like Google, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft that provide these benign services and completely dismiss the media investigations, requests from civil society, including myself, writing letters to these companies to say, look, if you look at their websites, they have these shiny human rights policies. They talk about their commitment to this framework called the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which tells the companies, you can't just go in any country and provide services and or have policies and not care about the human rights violations that might occur. Maybe not through you directly as a company, but through other actors. And when you ask them, have you done your heightened due diligence? You know, this exercise is even more important when you are operating in a context of war or an armed conflict. The answer is zero. They don't care because, of course, they live under or they benefit from this overall full impunity situation that, unfortunately, we are living through at the moment. So, to me, justice is accountability now more than ever.
Ala?
Thank you for this question. It is indeed very tricky because we choose to speak in English because Russian is a colonial language for the context in which we operate. And this is an extremely, we choose to not, because like I have Tatar language, there's Bashkir language, there's Kazakh language, there's Uzbek language, there's so many languages. We will not be able to pick one. You know, because the other one will be also, like, we'll have to agree on this. So we actually choose to speak English, as we do speak English with our Ukrainian colleagues today. So, Yeah, and also our understanding of coloniality and decoloniality is just evolving, because we haven't been speaking about Russia and post-Soviet, Soviet Union as a colonial state for many, many years, and now this is just starting to happen. So for us, it is happening, understanding what is decoloniality for us. I'm not even talking about the territories in the country, because I live here. I think it's more about, for me, it's about my experience. So, but what does it mean, how it affects us? It happens in parallel with the AI systems rolled out on these territories. And you know how, like also with Russian regime using all sorts of digital tools of digital colonization, you know, in all the regions, in the war on Ukraine, and in making different countries of Russian influence, like Kazakhstan, still use their digital platforms like Vkontakte and search engines and so on. So like the dependency is very strong, and so this knowledge is coming simultaneously, and so right now speaking English is really not our biggest problem. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take another question here and then we'll go to our online audience.
Thank you so much for this panel. It really brings home like what we need to fight against, I think. And for years, I've been analyzing technological environments and tech conferences, and there's been so much technotopia that seems so ridiculous that we can reform and decolonize techno-fascism and decolonize techno-colonialism somehow, but that's just really absurd, because it's doing what it was built to do in a way. And what I want to try to ask as a question is that what I was trying to bring up before about low-tech resistance, maybe we could look at ways of, if we can't build it in a local hack lab, like, you know, maybe what's required now is that we all need to get pagers that are made by our own comrades, so that we can avoid the net that has been created that corporates and militaries can you know, be our overlords if we're participating in that. So how do we extract ourselves from all these levels of techno-fascism through thinking about what can we actually really produce for technologies in the local sphere with our comrades, with people that we trust, with our communities, and stop using, boycott immediately as much as you possibly can the corporate tech that is being downloaded onto us.
Thank you. Would anyone want to answer this?
It's answered. I want to answer it in a way that I don't ramble. There are many aspects to it. I mean, what we've seen in Lebanon the past 2 days shows you that even what is considered as past technology can still be weaponized and turned into a deadly weapon in your car or in your home. And as much as I would love to be a Luddite and say, you know, I don't want any of that technology, I think that, quite frankly, I think that ship has already sailed. I don't think we would be able to take down these big tech companies. This big tech is there. They have so much power and influence, even over regulation. And here in Europe, there's been attempts to regulate these companies, to break them down through law, and you know, and to coerce them to say, look, you're not just some Uber entities that you can float above any regulation. And if you follow, for example, what's happening in Brazil and X, it's a very interesting story that shows you that one single company can actually defy an entire state and decide the future of its democratic institutions. So there are a lot of questions about digital sovereignty and what that means, and if it's even possible in this time and age. Yeah, I forewarned that I might be rambling. So honestly, I don't know what we can do aside from fixing the mess that we're in right now. Yeah.
I think we can take a question from the audience online.
Yes, thank you very much. We have a question from Manolo. He's a former speaker of us, and he's a video maker and an activist. He's very much engaged in solidarity with Gaza and Palestinian population. He's doing a lot of things since years, not just now. So his question is for Marwa, and is, we know how artificial intelligence is being used to exterminate those who oppose dissent. All the information is available, discussed and documented. Is there any point in reporting this genocide if no one can hold the killers accountable? If even international law cannot stop the genocide, what must we do to not be overwhelmed by powerlessness? What must be done to restore the historical sense of what is happening?
Thank you for this question. I'm glad Manolo asked it because it forces me to be more optimistic. And that is, I think, right now we're, at least for me personally, I see the world differently since October 7th. There's a world before and there's a world after where you see the meltdown of the entire system that was created after World War II, where international law, I'm sorry to say, has been turned into toilet paper. It's disrespected in every regard. No institution at this point, no one can hold Israel accountable. But I don't think the situation is sustainable. I don't think, and history is a great source for these types of lessons, that you cannot kill and oppress people for so long. It's not possible. And so I am a big believer that even now, right now, we feel frustrated. We feel like there is no, we're powerless, we're helpless. Whatever we do is not, we're not breaking through. I still think it's important for us to document, to archive, to continue speaking up, because history is being written as we speak. And I do not want to live in a world where, as we are in right now, there is still Nakba denial, where there might be denial of the genocide in Gaza. So, you know, we have to hope. We have to hope the situation will change, and we have to stick to that and work towards that goal.
Thank you very much.
I'll take another question here, please.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this super important panel and for all your inputs. I have it's more like a note with a question and then another note. So when Marwa and Milagros, you were both saying, why should we care? I find this shocking that you'd even ask, you know, that I get why, but I'm just like, it's crazy because everybody should know why, without saying, it can come to you at one point, like even if it's not, you know, affecting me as an individual. And I was like thinking about solidarity in this term, like, you know, like how do we actually practice a form of solidarity beyond tech? I think like it's such a like global issue of capitalism, of being individualized and of not being able to see beyond your own viewpoint and your own comfort zone, and always being scared about that your own comfort zone is being taken away, so you have to actually make that argument, you should care because it can also reach you. I think this is something, and the question is maybe like, what audience do you expect when you talk to? So who do you expect to talk to? And I wanted to have another note, Ala, because you were saying, it feels so, you said, I use your word dumb, but like, I actually think it's so beautiful to have the idea with the cake, because it's such a different language, you know, like food, it's like it's so essential, it's like something we understand, it's like physical, it's something we all have bodies, and I think like also this connection, it does so much to be in a room together also, even if I don't know most of the people here, and to listen to that applause when you were talking, that was, you know, extended, because there is solidarity. And I think this is something, or at least for me, these little snippets of hope or of like connecting and stuff are super valuable. And I don't know if you want to say something to this, but like, yeah.
Thank you. Milagros, maybe.
Yeah. No, you haven't. Thank you so much for that question. That's an excellent question. And I want to make clear, I didn't mean to underestimate this audience, but you wouldn't believe how often I get the question of, well, two types of question. The first one is, when I talk about wages, is, well, but isn't $1.70 a lot of money in Kenya? And also the question of, why, if the work is so terrible, why do people keep on doing it? You know, it's really, really very often that question comes. And by the way, let me give you the answer. No, it's not a lot of money in Kenya, $1.70. And also, we shouldn't be asking ourselves how low can we go with the wages. We should be asking ourselves how much more can these companies pay the workers. So I think switching the viewpoint and studying up, as the anthropologists say, is very, very important in these issues. So yeah, that is very widespread. And the second thing is, it's very important to me that this doesn't, there is a high risk of this becoming a poverty porn. So people just looking at this, saying, oh, poor people, yeah, it's good that we know, and then going home and forget about it. I think it is important to me that we all know that this is not just happening somewhere far away, this is happening to us, and there is a correlation between the issues that Marwa was explaining and the ways in which data is created. So, yeah, but thank you for pointing that out.
I want to quickly add something. So we have, as people who come from different parts of the world, you know, quite frankly, as a Palestinian living in Germany, I don't have that much power compared to a white German. And with privilege and different levels of power, people can do something to challenge these systems. For instance, in the keynote you shared the ban facial recognition campaign, which my organization is actually part of. I think that is one thing that it might be tied to your immediate environment, and you have the democratic tools, or at least the vehicles in which you can advocate or to help through regulation, through law, to ban these systems. So in a way, what you're doing in your own immediate environment will have an impact on also the rest of the world. So there is a role for each one of us to play, even if trying to take down this huge puzzle, because it can seem very overwhelming when we talk about capitalism. But there are very little ways in which people here, for example, or at the EU level, can exercise their power, at least the privileges they have to insist on accountability.
Maybe also I will shortly comment on what you said about the sensuality. It is a method, actually, called decolonial aesthetics. And I don't, how many people know about it? Okay, so I won't talk a lot about it, but just saying that it's something that comes from art and came from South America, and I forgot the name of the person who coined it, unfortunately. But in the post-Soviet space, an author and scholar, Madina Tlastanova, popularized it. And decolonial aesthesis comes as a counter command to aesthetic, because in the art, when we, in art we focus a lot here in the West, on aesthetics. What is aesthetics? We talk about aesthetics, and aesthetics also have a certain norm to it, etc. So the colonial aesthetics focus on sensual experience. So it focuses on smells, it focuses on tastes, it focuses on how you feel in a particular situation. It comes from your senses. So and I think that this is what I'm also trying to kind of implement, or we're trying to implement in thinking about AI systems. Could the method of decolonial aesthetics also be applied into thinking of technology? So not necessarily AI, to me, don't want to go on that, but technology in general, designing technology, could we come from the point of decolonial aesthetics? So yeah, thank you for that note.
Thank you, everyone. I'm kind of just that was a very great question to end also with a bit more of what can we do in a, to highlight the agency that many people from throughout their different, basically, context can have, and the roles people can play in doing something for a better future, I guess. Before I let you all go, I'm going to invite Tatiana to introduce the next, to say something about tomorrow, or yeah, then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy that we could do this panel, so important. And I also want to mention that Marwa will be back with us the 31st of October, that we will do one of our community meetup at Stadtwerkstatt, and she will be together with Adi Al-Khatib. So we will go more in depth in these discussions, and we will have 2 hours time, and this is the 31st of October from 7 to 9. The event is already online. It's called The Perfect Storm. So we will go also more in depth into AI and warfare and evidence of war crimes and human rights abuses. And if you want, you can already register online. You just go on the disruption.org website, and in our series of events, you already find it, and you can register, and the entrance is for free. So you are all welcome to come and go more in depth. But again, also I want to remember the workshop with allapopp and Dinara Suleva tomorrow, that I think is kind of sold out already, but you can see online. If you still want to enroll, you can see actually if sold out or not. I think we are pretty much there, but have a look. So we will go more in depth into this discussion as well. And so thank you also Mila and Walid. And we will meet again in 15 minutes. So we do a bit of a shorter break because we are a bit late. And we have a panel subverting alienation. Please come back in 15 minutes, and thank you again. Thank you.